Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm unboxing, installing and reviewing a really exciting brand new product from Diamond Electronic Drums in the UK. I've been in contact with Dave, who is the boss and engineer of that excellent trigger company, and he has sent me the very first beta test model of this new drop-in multi-point trigger called Sonic Balance. As you can see, he has shipped me the newer drop-in plate, which has two crossbars, which apparently help with rim sensitivity, a mini jack to 1/4-inch jack cable, a TRS cable, Allen key, and a separate cross-stick trigger that actually mounts to the lugs. And I have to add that this is the very first third-party trigger I've ever seen with a cross-stick trigger bundled with the system. And I think that's just very innovative and cool. Today I'm installing the trigger into my 13-inch snare drum, which currently has the standard Diamond Drums trigger in it. And I'll install that one into one of my floor toms later. It's truly an awesome trigger in its own right. You might have noticed a bit of grub on the batter side of the mesh head, which I'll clean before I reassemble the drum. From time to time I get questions on this channel about how to wash mesh heads. Look, they're robust, don't overthink it. I just use warm soapy water with a clean dishcloth, rinse well, let it air dry. You can theoretically even put them in a dishwasher, but to be clear, I'm not advising you to do that. Warm soapy water is your friend. So I've been kind of nagging Dave for a while now to build me a trigger that wasn't quite so hot as his other models, specifically for Efnote and Mimic Pro modules, which are notoriously very sensitive modules. And ideally also to build me a trigger that has a separate cross-stick trigger in the same sort of way that Efnote have in their system. And we're going to find out today whether or not he's in fact delivered on that remit. Stay tuned for my full review at the end of this video. So now that we've stripped our shell of all of the hardware and the old wrap, I'm now going to be wrapping the shell to match the rest of our kit in this turquoise sparkle. If you watch this channel regularly, you already know how to rewrap a drum by now, but if you're new here or you just want to enjoy some visual ASMR, then hang around for about 30 seconds or so. So I'm applying some good quality, thin, double-sided tape, and then we carefully rewrap the drum. It's kind of a three-handed job, so I tend to do that off camera. Next, select a drill bit the same diameter as the lug and vent holes, and then use it to pierce holes in the wrap. We can then refit our lugs, and then we use the vent hole to insert the 1/4-inch jack socket and affix it with the supplied washer. This drop-in trigger, unsurprisingly, just drops in the shell, and sits nicely on the bearing edge. Now I'm reapplying my freshly clean 3-ply mesh head and tuning it up. And now for the 3D printed cross-stick trigger. Similar to the way that Efnote does their cross-stick triggers, this one attaches to two separate lugs, and then we can just sort of adjust the exact position and tighten everything down with the supplied wing nuts. As I'm reassembling the drum, I'll just take a moment to address a question that I get super often. It's the which is better question. Diamond drop-in triggers or Jobeky fast fit triggers? As subscribers will know, I use both on my kit, and I gotta say that both types of triggers trigger excellently. Maybe one day I'll do a Diamond versus Jobeky shootout if you like. Let me know in the comments if that's something you'd like to see. But one definite advantage of these Diamond triggers is that this 3D printed plastic makes each drum pad significantly lighter than Jobeky triggers, which are all made with sheet metal. And I'm really noticing that as I'm assembling this already fairly heavy drum, that a Jobeky fast fit trigger would indeed make this pretty heavy, I suspect, and not super fun to transport to gigs. Just something to keep in mind. So I'm reapplying the rim protector now, so we're almost done. And I think that the drum has come up quite nicely indeed. Installation of the triggers was very straightforward, as you could see. Maybe one small bit of feedback for Diamond Drums is that I think it would be quite cool to have the cross-stick trigger colour printed in the sort of dark grey to match the Efnote drums and cymbals and hardware. But I'm sure that he'd be happy to do that, and I've seen him do triggers in red, black, blue, etc. But overall, I really like the way that this A2E conversion has come together. Time to plug in the head and rim trigger, and the cross-stick trigger, and give it a proper test with my Efnote and Mimic Pro modules. Okay, review time. As always with my reviews, my standard disclaimer applies. Diamond Drums sent me this trigger to review for free, and I can keep it. But on this channel, my opinions are always my own. But I have to say that I really like this trigger. Unsurprisingly, its strengths are in the main drop-in basket, where you can tell much of the R&D is gone. I can tell that Dave has really worked his magic dialing down the sensitivity to work well with Efnote modules in particular. It seems that he has rebalanced the head and rim triggers so that sensitivity range is more in favour of hotter modules, and that the centre crosspiece seems to give more connection to the edge from the centre for a better rim signal distribution. The sidebar for cross stick is also excellent. I feel like a couple of minor improvements could be good though. Having a dark grey option, as I said before, would be a cool aesthetic, and I reckon potentially improving the mounting to make the brackets a little bit more gig tough, and perhaps improving the isolation could be useful as well. Because whilst the sidebar worked really well with the Efnote, given its native module settings, it didn't do separation quite as well with the Pearl Mimic Pro, even with crosstalk enabled. Although I'd say that the sidebar was very good indeed, and a much nicer playing experience compared with, say, the Roland BT1, which feels too rubbery for my liking. Pairing the trigger with the Mimic, I give it a 4 out of 5 stars, maybe a 4.5 out of 5, a slight mark down for the sidebar isolation, although the main trigger basket itself is basically perfect. But with an Efnote module, I give it a 5 out of 5 stars, a solid 5 out of 5. I've been playing it now for several weeks, and it's truly an excellent trigger. And in my opinion, it's a really cost-effective alternative to Efnote snare drums, which are very expensive indeed. Pair one of these triggers with a cheap snare shell and a mesh head, and you have a world-class trigger for less than half the price, maybe a third of the price, that triggers just as well, if not better than the brand name option. So I can highly recommend this trigger if you are an Efnote player in particular. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my channel, and stay tuned for my next review, which will be the Extreme Drums X1R tandem trigger.